Now, there seems to be some respite for Sri Lanka, which is battling its worst economic crisis in history. The International Monetary Fund has announced a preliminary bailout package worth $2.9 billion for the struggling island nation. The bailout will be given over the course of 4 years. The agreement comes after 9-day talks in Colombo. The IMF said that the objectives of Sri Lanka's new fund-supported program was to restore microeconomic stability and debt sustainability. The program will aim to raise government revenue to support fiscal consolidation. It will also aim to introduce new pricing for fuel and electricity, hike social spending, bolster central bank autonomy and rebuild depleted foreign reserves. This agreement is subject to approval by IMF's executive board. It also requires Sri Lankan authorities to follow through on previously agreed on measures. The IMF needs financing assurances from Sri Lanka's official creditors. The program aims to reach primary surplus of 2.3% of the GDP by 2024. Now, this announcement, it comes after President Ranil Wickremesinghe presented an interim budget aimed at clinching a deal with the IMF. Wickremesinghe, who is also Sri Lanka's finance minister, presented the budget on the 30th of August. And this revised budget, the island nation's deficit projection for 2022 to 9.8% from 8.8%. He also outlined fiscal reforms such as hike in value-added taxes. Now, Sri Lanka needs to restructure nearly $30 billion of debt. Talks with other main creditors such as India and China. Sri Lanka has been facing, as you know, acute shortage of fuel and other basic goods for months now. The country is also facing high inflation following the political turmoil. Sri Lanka's annual inflation is now at 65%. Now, for more on this, we have our correspondent Dasuni Athoda joining us now from Colombo. Thank you so much for joining us, Dasuni. This is the International Monetary Fund said that it has reached a staff-level agreement to support Sri Lanka with a $2.9 billion bailout. What can you tell us?
Well, absolutely, Hem. Certainly a hopeful day here for Sri Lanka in terms of coming out of an economic crisis. Yes, the $2.9 billion staff level agreement has now been finalized. But we have to keep in mind that this is still subject to the approval of the board. Nevertheless, the sentiment is surely positive. However, when you do read this official statement of the IMF, it can be seen that they are looking towards some serious and critical reforms, especially when it comes to Sri Lanka's financial stability and security. They are looking at a possible wealth tax, also maintaining exchange rates at an approved and a competitive state.
Right, absolutely. In fact, I was just going to come to that. The IMF has said that the objective of Sri Lanka's new fund-supported program was to restore microeconomic stability, debt sustainability. Now, we've been hearing things like debt restructuring for quite some time now. What are some of the immediate changes in your assessment that we can expect going forward?
Yes, debt restructuring is a phrase that has been used quite commonly for the past few months in Sri Lanka in terms of Sri Lanka's ongoing economic crisis. And we did see countries like India, the US, and even Japan coming forward to say that as countries, they will be joining in Sri Lanka's efforts for debt restructuring. We are yet to see a solid plan come out from even government authorities or even the Central Bank of Sri Lanka as to how and in what proportions will debt restructuring take place and with what countries, in what percentages. And we have to also keep in mind that China did issue a statement earlier saying that they will not be looking forward to debt restructuring. So it is quite an interesting scenario, right, so as to say, when we have countries that are for debt restructuring and some that are quite reluctant to go forward with it.
Absolutely, and Dasuni, as you mentioned earlier, this agreement is subject to approval by the IMF's executive board. It also requires Sri Lankan authorities to give some assurances. Now, what sort of measures are we looking at here?
Well, in terms of the IMF, it is quite clear that they will be looking at financial stability in addition to political stability in the country, both of which Sri Lanka did not have for the majority of this year. In addition to the economic stability, it is vital that Sri Lanka's governance and Sri Lanka's politics are stable and are in order. because we did report for the past few months Sri Lanka's political scenario in itself was also quite turbulent, having that we now have President Vikramasinghe on the reins as well. So this new budget, which will be voted for on the 2nd of September, will also be a crucial point for the IMF in seeing how stable and conducive has Sri Lanka's political outlook become, just as much as its economic outlook, because right now both of them are sort of in relative to each other.
All right. Well, Dasini, thank you so much for joining us with all the updates on this. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.